Hey everyone, thank you for coming to my talk. We're going to be talking about how to get started building with, I'm short, so yeah. Cool. So it's how to get started building with account abstraction today using the Biconomy SDK. Hey, I'm Rahat. I'm head of developer relations at Biconomy. Formerly, I was a front-end engineer for a few years, did some Solidity dev as well. Former founder, like tinkered and built with a few different things. Also a former hip hop artist. I've retired, so I will not be rapping on stage today. You can just a couple places you can follow me. I look like one of these two things online, so these are me. But today we're going to be talking about the current UX of Web3. How many developers in the house? Okay. As a developer, have you ever accidentally committed private keys, an API key, or something to GitHub? No? Yeah, it's happened, right? It happens to everyone. And if it happens with one of your Web3 projects, you might have private keys associated to a wallet that you put up on GitHub, and then someone comes and drains all your funds, and you get wrecked. So this is not a great UX, especially for developers or really anyone, because if we have to keep track of these private keys that are associated with our accounts, these seed phrases and everything, it's a lot of complexity, a lot of ways for people to kind of drain all of our funds from these accounts. And this leads to a complicated Web3 UX that happens whenever you're trying to get onboarded onto a dApp, right? If you think about it, if you're brand new to Web3, the first thing you have to do is create a wallet. After you create a wallet, you then go to an exchange. You get some money onto that exchange. You send money from that exchange to your wallet, and then you can use a dApp. There are many, many friction points before you can actually use a product. If you're at this hackathon and you're building a product for users to actually use, Web3 is very hard for that, because there are multiple friction points before they can ever use your product, and that's a pretty bad thing. And the last thing is gas fees. Paying gas kind of sucks, especially if you're on an L1, wherever. But we have different scaling solutions for that. You've spoken to a couple people just now who are talking in that direction. But we can take a lot of these experiences and make it so that people don't have to deal with them so much. How can we actually fix this? How can we improve the user experience in Web3? In comes account abstraction. So account abstraction is maybe something you folks have heard about for a while. A couple months ago, what happened was an ERC 4337 was launched onto the Ethereum mainnet. And we're going to be breaking down a little bit what that means, how that helps us, and how that actually can help your Web3 UX. So just a gist, just like a TLDR, what exactly is this thing called account abstraction? It's really the ability to add arbitrary logic to the process of validating a transaction. So take any transaction, it's the transaction itself, there's this, with 4337, there's no actual protocol level changes. What we're really doing is just looking at a transaction, adding additional logic around it, and doing whatever we want with it. So this additional logic and the way of tracking it, these things are called user operations or user ops. So user ops are going to contain all of the information that you will eventually need to execute a transaction on the blockchain, but they will have additional points to them that allow you to do more things. I mentioned an entry point contract earlier. There's an entry point contract that would be deployed on every chain, and this entry point contract essentially handles everything that goes through this account abstraction flow. So we're going to go through that brief overview of that architecture in a second, but what we really do is what we're trying to do is achieve better UX through smart accounts, or wallets that are deployed with smart contracts. So rather than having a wallet that is secured by the ECDSA, it is secured by code. And once you have a wallet that is secured by code, you can add your additional arbitrary logic on top of that. So the main things you want to ask yourself in this is what types of authentication do you want to add to your transaction? What do you want to do before a transaction actually takes place? And this is where AA can come in and help you out. So here's a brief overview. The little green box is what you can imagine to be a smart contract wallet. It can be owned by an externally owned account, which is like a regular wallet that you might be used to right now. It can be owned by, and one of the use cases we'll show you is like social logins being owned by like an email address or anything like that. There's multiple ways that you can actually own this account, but this account, again, is run by code, right? So that arbitrary logic just depends on like your imagination, pretty much. So this wallet is going to handle sending all of your user ops to an alternative mempool. It's just where a whole bunch of user ops exist. In this alternative mempool, you'll have a service called a bundler. Bundler just is a service, can be written in Rust, TypeScript, whatever, that is going to be looking through the mempool, looking at these user ops, and sending them to the entry point contract. So the entry point contract now has functions that allow you to handle all of these user operations, right? And from the entry point contract, there's a few other interactions that can happen. You can, it validates the user ops coming from the actual smart contract wallet, but it can also interact with what's called a paymaster. Paymasters can do pretty cool things, one of which is sponsoring gas for a user. Another one is allowing a user to pay for gas in any token other than the native token that they want. So now you see like other contracts coming in, being able to add additional logic, additional kind of like use cases for you in this sense. So account abstraction is something that takes some time to really wrap your head around. I've done a few like threads on Twitter and things like that. So if you want to like go through and do like a whiteboarding kind of approach on account abstraction, you can take a look at a couple of the things that are linked through here. I'll leave that open just for a sec. Cool. Now, I explained a whole bunch of things about contracts and things that are deployed, but you probably don't want to code all that yourself, right? You want to get started building with these stuff as quickly and as easily as possible. So today we're going to be learning a little bit about the Biconomy SDK, and we're going to look at two different demos to do so. So we'll start with the first one. How many people have like swapped a coin on Uniswap before? Okay, a few people. So, or just swapped any coin on any exchange. Let's go through this really quickly. Refresh. All right. So this is a demo that I built, which is just a miniature version of Uniswap. I have this connect to Web3 button, which is just like a traditional, almost like wallet sign-in. All right. Now, I can connect with MetaMask, Wallet Connect, whatever, but today I'm just going to be connecting with Google. So I'm connecting with my Google account. What's happening under the hood is this package is utilizing Web3 auth to create a Ethereum address for us, but we're going to be taking that and actually using that as the owner of a smart contract account that is being deployed in the background. And that is all being done through the Biconomy SDK. So that's loading here, but now this address that I have here is a smart contract wallet. And you'll see I have a little bit of crypto on here. These are some of my assets. And this is the first kind of like layer of things, right? As a non-Web3 native person, I can come in here. I can use my Google account to generate an Ethereum address for myself. It's completely bypassing, some of the onboarding that it normally takes to get into Web3. Next thing I want to do, I have some funds in here, but as someone who is not native to Web3, I might need to get some funds onto my account. We have complete fiat onboarding within the dApp, so I can come in here, grab whatever I need. This specific dApp is on the Polygon network, somewhere in here. There it is. And it's using USDC for everything, so I would buy some USDC. Previous to this, I just sent myself some USDC from another wallet. I've got 8 here. But the other thing you'll notice here is that there is 0 Matic on this account. So generally, when you're on the Polygon blockchain, you have to pay for gas in Matic. That is their native token. There is no Matic on this. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So now I'm going to execute a swap. This is on mainnet. So this is going to be an actual mainnet transaction. So on Polygon mainnet, I'm just going to swap 1 USDC for wrapped Ether. Hit the swap button. Swapping is happening in the background. Now, generally, when you swap, if you're swapping for the first time, you have to approve a certain amount of tokens to be able to do the swap. What's happening here is that I'm only approving the exact amount of tokens that needs to be swapped, which is 1, and at the same time doing the swap. So I'm taking 2 transactions, bundling them together, A, to save on gas, and B, so that someone who is not crypto native doesn't have to think about approving and then swapping. It is just done for them in the background, and there's a safety layer because they're only approving the specific amount of tokens that you want to actually swap, right? So this is my actual transaction happening right now, Polygon scan, and it was a success. So we've gone through, you'll see that this interacted with the entry point contract on Polygon mainnet through our Biconomy bundler. And I took $1 in USD coin and swapped it for wrapped Ether. So this is a full LiveNet real transaction that just happened. Cool. So how do we actually do some of that? Take a look at a little bit of code. This is some of the code that is actually powering this transaction completely. So a lot of it is just using some of our SDKs, right? So the first kind of thing you can look at is the Web3 Auth SDK that we have, which just is powered by Web3 Auth under the hood. There's not a lot you have to do. I have a login function here, and all of this is just boilerplate code that you can get directly from our docs, where I'm just initializing the SDK. I am whitelisting the specific URL, so this is in production, so I'm just making sure I whitelist the production URL, and basically just get set up there. There are styles that CSS files that you were given that I put into like my main app folder. This is an Next.js React app, and those styles are what's making that login widget actually look the way it is. You can completely customize that. You can gut that. You can rebrand that to whatever you need it to be. But out of the box, if you want to just get quickly started, you have that sign-in widget ready for you to go. The next thing to kind of look at here is going to be setting up the actual smart account. So like I said, the account that I showed you is an account that is governed by code. So that is done for you in this session here. Again, just utilizing our smart account module from the Biconomy SDK. You're just specifying which chain you want to deploy on. You get an API key from our dashboard, which I'll show you in a second. And at this point, you have the option of either deploying the person's account for them right away. Again, if you set up a paymaster and gas tank on our dashboard, that is completely free to them. Or on their first transaction, that deployment would just be added to their actual first transaction. The cool thing about this type of account is it's called a counterfactual account, meaning that you already have an address for that specific account before it's even deployed, right? So before it's deployed, you have an address, you can start sending funds to it, and then once it gets deployed through their first transaction, you're good to go. So now we've set up the smart account, we have everything there. We have just like a logout function. And from here, the main other thing is the actual swap. Sorry, my computer seems to be a little slow. Okay. So again, so the actual swap happens like once you create this smart account, it essentially, if you've ever used a package like Ethers.js or WAGMI or anything like that, the API for using that is very, very similar. Slight changes, of course, but you would initialize and get your API, pass a provider to your package. Are you good? Okay, something's going on. Sorry, I'm not sure what's up. Am I like, are you also like my terrible desktop? Don't know what happened. Okay. And I'm apparently like recording this. All right. I'm not sure what happened there. We'll pretend that my desktop was never shown live. So, okay, now I can move through things. Let's see, swap component, where did I put it in here? Okay, yeah. Here's where I'm actually handling the swap. So for handling the swap, I'm using a pool address for wrapped Ether to USDC, which is available from Uniswap. It looks like my computer restarted somehow. I don't know what, sorry. But the tokens that I'm just using for this example are USDC and ETH. So these are the addresses for those. And what's really cool here is, I'm just using the Ethers.js package to get a connection to the contract. And for whenever I need to directly interact and make transactions, I make sure that I have an instance of the smart account. So the smart account that was created in the previous component, I've just passed that down here. So these are the actual transactions. So I just populate transaction. First is this approve that I mentioned. So the approve is just going to take the swap router address and the exact amount that is going to be approved. This is my first transaction, just that the address that it's going to, as well as the data for the transaction. These are the parameters for the actual swap. This is just from the Uniswap documentation. And what happens here is like I take my smart account and it has a method called send transaction batch, which takes an object that contains an array of different transactions. So that first transaction for approving and that next transaction for actually doing the swap. So it's really, you just build out an array with the transactions that you want to execute and you pass it to this function. And you now have the ability to execute several transactions in one go. So this is a very basic example, approving and swapping. But think of like other use cases in DeFi. If you want to swap, add liquidity, stake, whatever you want to do, you can do all that in one click. And this allows us to like actually bring users who are not familiar with Web3 and DeFi concepts into the space. We want to, at some point, we just have to like make it as easy as possible for folks to come in and actually use the products that we're building. When you're building a product, if you're not optimizing for your user's experience, that's a problem. If you're only going to be kind of like marketing to Web3 natives, you're not going to have a lot of users. Our space is still very, very small. So this is just a one way of like onboarding more users into Web3. Cool. So let's take a look at the actual dashboard. So this is what the Biconomy dashboard looks like. I'm going to sign in with GitHub. There's multiple options for signing in. And these are my paymasters. Essentially, this is like a paymaster as a service. You come in here, you create a paymaster. You don't have to worry about the contracts. We kind of like take care of everything for you. If you wanted to create a new paymaster, you click here. You name it. And you choose the network. These are some of the different networks that we support. So I did one on Polygon. I'm not going to completely register. Okay, I guess I registered. But I'm not going to do the full thing here. But the last part is really like just setting up a gas tank. When you set up your gas tank, you just connect your wallet, add some funds, and these are the funds that you use to actually go ahead and sponsor the gas for your users. Coming very soon, we're going to have a token paymaster, so that rather than just paying for the gas for the user, just think about that example I showed you. Instead of you paying the gas for the user, they pay completely in USDC. So it's not having to worry about the native token, being able to conceptualize how much they're spending in gas, and doing it all through one token. So I'm going to go to this mainnet demo contract that I have. And here I can actually add and authorize different contracts that can be sponsored. So first is that swap router. So the swap router I made sure that any functions that are specifically associated to swapping are authorized to be sponsored. So as soon as you add a smart contract address here, the ABI is going to automatically populate as long as this is verified. Or you can just add in your own ABI and then authorize each of the different write methods. And I did the same thing for link, wrapped Ether, and USDC. I haven't actually implemented the link yet, but if we look at the USDC contract, the approved method is approved for actually sending out USDC. And the transfer, I'm going to be implementing a transfer so you can actually transfer out the funds from the account into another wallet. And yeah, that's kind of how you can get started today. Using the Biconomy SDK, getting started with account abstraction. I do have some resources that you can use to actually get started. This was just the demo of what I just showed you, just in case my demo failed live. It did not fail. Wonderful. Only my computer failed. But here is a starter kit that you can use to get started building with all of this. So this starter kit has 3 repos attached to it. One is a basic NFT example of minting a gasless NFT. It shows you kind of how to actually set that up. One is an even more basic example of a counter smart contract where you just increment a count and make that completely gasless, add social logins and everything around that. That is also the example in our quick start guide on the documentation, so you can compare that and see how to get started there. And the last example is just a Next.js authentication example. It gives you all the different configurations that you need so you can quickly get started in building on top of these. And if you're excited to build, we would love to know what you do build. You can tag us at Biconomy, myself at Rahat Codes on Twitter. And thank you. I'll be around if you have questions, if you want to meet up and chat about anything. Thank you.